My name is Lorraine Mitchell. I'm 58 years old, and I'm sitting in my son's living room right now with my lawyer, a police officer, and a smile on my face that could light up the whole city of Atlanta. But let me back up and tell you how I got here. Because this story starts with the worst betrayal a mother could ever imagine. I raised Marcus by myself. His father left when Marcus was only 3 years old, just walked out one Saturday morning and never came back. I worked 2 jobs for 15 years to make sure my baby had everything he needed. I was a nursing assistant during the day and cleaned office buildings at night. Some nights I only got 4 hours of sleep, but I never complained. Marcus was my whole world. I put that boy through college, Georgia State University, 4 years, every penny I could scrape together. I ate ramen noodles and wore the same 3 outfits for years so Marcus could have new clothes and textbooks. When he graduated with his business degree, I cried so hard I thought my heart would burst with pride. My baby was going to have a better life than me. That's all I ever wanted. Marcus got a good job at a marketing firm in Atlanta, met a woman named Chanel, and they got married 3 years ago. I liked Chanel at first. She was pretty, had a good job as a real estate agent, and she made Marcus happy. But over time, I started noticing things. The way she would roll her eyes when I talked, how she would check her phone whenever I shared stories about Marcus as a child, the way she would find excuses for why they couldn't come to Sunday dinner at my apartment. Marcus started changing too. He used to call me every day, but it became once a week, then once a month. When I called him, he always sounded distracted, like he was doing me a favor by answering. But I told myself he was just busy building his career and his marriage. I didn't want to be one of those mothers who couldn't let go. Then last year, something wonderful happened. Marcus called me on a Tuesday evening, and he sounded excited, like the little boy I used to know. "Mama, I have a surprise for you," he said, and my heart just swelled up with joy. "What is it, baby?" I asked. "You've always talked about wanting to visit Africa, to see where our ancestors came from. Remember how you used to tell me stories about Ghana, and how you wished you could walk on that soil?" I did remember. When Marcus was young, I used to take him to the library every Saturday, and we would read books about African history together. I told him about the slave castles in Ghana, about the door of no return, and how I dreamed of one day making that pilgrimage. But on my salary, it was just a dream. "Of course I remember," I said, my voice getting thick with emotion. "Well, Mama, I bought you a ticket. We're going to Ghana together, you and me and Chanel. 2 weeks, all expenses paid. It's my gift to you for everything you've done for me." I started crying right there on the phone. After all those years of sacrifice, after all those nights wondering if my son even remembered what I'd done for him, here he was, making my biggest dream come true. "Marcus, baby, I don't know what to say," I sobbed. "Just say yes, Mama. We leave in 3 weeks." Those 3 weeks felt like 3 years. I went to my church, First Baptist on Auburn Avenue, and told everyone about my trip. Sister Patricia from the choir cried with me. Pastor Williams prayed over me. My best friend Dee Dee helped me shop for clothes at the thrift store because I wanted to look nice but didn't have money for new things. "Girl, your son is finally showing you the appreciation you deserve," Dee Dee said as we looked through racks of dresses. "I told you he would come around." I should have listened to the little voice in my head that said something felt off. Marcus had never been this generous before. Even at his wedding, he didn't offer to help with my hotel room. But I pushed those thoughts away. I wanted to believe my son loved me. I needed to believe it. The day we left for Ghana, Marcus picked me up from my apartment at 4 a.m. Chanel was in the front seat, looking annoyed that she had to be up so early. I climbed into the back with my old suitcase, the same one I'd had for 20 years. "You excited, Mama?" Marcus asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "More than you know, baby," I said. "Thank you so much for this. I can't believe I'm really going to walk on African soil." Chanel whispered something to Marcus, and they both laughed. At the time, I thought they were just sharing a private joke. Now I know they were laughing at me, at the fool they were about to play. The flight was long, almost 12 hours. I sat in the middle seat between Marcus and a stranger, too excited to sleep. I kept looking out the window, watching the clouds, thinking about my ancestors who had made a similar journey in chains. But I was going back free. I was going back to reclaim something that had been stolen from us. We landed in Accra, the capital of Ghana, early in the morning. The heat hit me as soon as we stepped off the plane, thick and heavy, but it felt like a warm embrace. This was the motherland. I was home. Marcus had booked us a hotel near the airport. Nothing fancy, but clean and comfortable. We spent the first day recovering from jet lag. I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open, but I was too happy to care. The next day, Marcus said we would start sightseeing. Mama, Chanel and I are going to go explore the city today. Check out some spots for her real estate research, Marcus said at breakfast. Why don't you rest here at the hotel? You still look tired. I was disappointed, but I understood. They were young and wanted to explore on their own. Okay, baby. Y'all go ahead. I'll rest up and we can all go out tomorrow. Sounds good, Mama, Marcus said, kissing my forehead. That kiss felt real. It felt like love. That's what made what happened next hurt so much. They left around 9 in the morning. I spent the day in the hotel, napping and watching Ghanaian TV. I tried calling Dee Dee back home, but the international rates were too expensive, so I just sent her a text saying I'd made it safely. Marcus and Chanel came back late that evening, and we had dinner at a small restaurant near the hotel. The food was amazing, jollof rice and fried plantains and grilled tilapia. I felt like I was tasting history. Tomorrow we'll take you to Cape Coast, Marcus said. That's where the slave castles are. I know that's what you really want to see. Oh, Marcus, yes, I said, grabbing his hand across the table. Thank you, baby. Thank you so much. But tomorrow never came. Not the tomorrow I was expecting, anyway. The next morning, Marcus woke me up early. Mama, change of plans. We need to head to the airport. I was confused. The airport? Why? I thought we were going to Cape Coast. Something came up with Chanel's work. We have to fly back early, but don't worry, we already rebooked your flight. You'll stay here for the full 2 weeks like we planned, and then you'll fly back. I sat up in bed, my heart starting to race. Wait, what? Y'all are leaving me here alone? Mama, you're not a child. You can handle 2 weeks in Ghana. Plus, this way you get the full experience you wanted. We'll see you back home. Something in his voice was cold, distant. This wasn't my Marcus. Baby, I don't understand. Can't Chanel handle her work from here? Can't it wait? Mama, I'm not arguing about this. Get dressed. We need to leave in 30 minutes. The drive to the airport was silent. Chanel stared out the window, a small smile on her face. Marcus kept his eyes on the road. I sat in the back seat feeling like my world was falling apart, but I kept telling myself there had to be a good explanation. When we got to the airport, Marcus pulled up to the departures area and turned to look at me. Okay, Mama, this is where we part ways. Your hotel is paid for 2 weeks. Here's some money for food and taxis. He handed me an envelope with what looked like a few $100s in Ghanaian cedis. Marcus, please, I don't want to stay here alone, I said, and I could hear the desperation in my own voice. I'm scared. I don't know anyone here. I don't know my way around. You'll figure it out, Mama. You're always talking about how strong you are, how you raised me all by yourself. Well, here's your chance to prove it. He got out of the car and pulled my suitcase from the trunk. Your return flight is in 2 weeks. The hotel has all the information. I climbed out of the car, my legs shaking. Marcus, baby, please don't do this. Why are you doing this? Chanel rolled down her window and looked at me with pure contempt. Because we're tired of you, Lorraine. We're tired of the guilt trips, the constant reminders of what you did for Marcus. You think you're some kind of saint? You're just a burden. Marcus wanted to get rid of you, and this was the easiest way. Have fun in Africa. It's what you always wanted, right? She laughed, actually laughed, and it was the cruelest sound I'd ever heard. Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes. He just got back in the car and drove away, leaving me standing on the curb with my old suitcase and a broken heart. I stood there for a long time, watching cars come and go, watching families hug and kiss and say goodbye to each other with love. I thought about all those years of sacrifice, all those nights I went without so Marcus could have more. I thought about the dreams I'd given up, the life I'd put on hold, all for a son who had just abandoned me in a foreign country like I was nothing. And then I thought about what Chanel had said. They wanted to get rid of me. This wasn't just a cruel joke. This was calculated. They had planned this. I wiped my tears, picked up my suitcase, and walked into the airport. I found a quiet corner and sat down to think. I had about $300 in Ghanaian money, which was maybe $80 in American currency. I had no return ticket. They'd lied about that too. I was stuck in Ghana with almost no money and no way home. But I'm Lorraine Mitchell. I'm a Black woman who survived raising a child alone, who worked 2 jobs for 15 years, who put myself through nursing assistant certification while working full-time. I've survived worse than this. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I had about $2,000 in my savings account, money I'd been putting away for years for emergencies. I guess this qualified as an emergency. I found a customer service desk and asked about flights back to Atlanta. The next available flight with an open seat was in 3 days, and it cost $1,800. I stood there for a moment, looking at that price, thinking about how long it had taken me to save that money. Then I thought about Marcus's face when he drove away, and I bought the ticket. For the next 3 days, I stayed at a small guest house near the airport, run by a kind Ghanaian woman named Amma. When I told her what had happened, she cried with me and refused to let me pay full price for the room. "That boy needs to learn respect," she said, shaking her head. "But don't worry, sister. God sees everything. He will make it right." On my last night in Ghana, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Marcus and Chanel, probably back home laughing about how they'd dumped me in Africa. I thought about my little apartment in Atlanta, about my job, about the life I'd go back to, now without even the comfort of believing my son loved me too. And that's when something inside me shifted. I felt it like a physical thing, like a door closing on one part of my life and another door opening. I wasn't going to go back to Atlanta and cry and feel sorry for myself. I wasn't going to let them win. I sat up in bed, turned on the light, and started making a list. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing. Marcus had made the biggest mistake of his life when he left me in Ghana. Because now I had nothing left to lose, and a mother scorned is more dangerous than he could ever imagine. The flight back to Atlanta gave me plenty of time to think. I had a notebook with me, and I filled page after page with notes, questions, and plans. By the time the plane landed, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Dee Dee picked me up from the airport. When she saw my face, she knew immediately that something was wrong. "Girl, what happened?" she asked, pulling me into a hug right there in the arrivals area. I told her everything, every single detail. And when I was done, Dee Dee's face was set in a way I'd never seen before. "We're going to destroy him," she said quietly. "That boy needs to learn what happens when you treat your mother like trash." "I need a lawyer," I said. "A good one. And I need to know everything about Marcus's finances, his house, his business dealings." Dee Dee smiled. "Girl, my nephew Jerome is a lawyer. He specializes in elder abuse and fraud. And he's mean as hell in the courtroom. Let me make a call." 2 days later, I was sitting in Jerome's office, a sleek space in downtown Atlanta with a view of the city. Jerome was 35, sharp as a tack, and when I told him my story, his eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Mrs. Mitchell, what your son did to you is called elder abandonment, and it's a crime in the state of Georgia." On top of that, if we can prove he defrauded you in any way, we can go after him civilly and criminally." "He didn't defraud me," I said slowly. "He paid for the trip like he said he would." "But did he tell you he was going to abandon you there? Did he tell you there was no return ticket? Did he take you there under false pretenses?" I thought about Marcus's excited phone call, his promises about us spending 2 weeks together as a family, his lies about the return ticket. "Yes," I said. "He lied about all of it." Jerome leaned back in his chair, a smile spreading across his face. "Then we have a case. And Mrs. Mitchell, I'm going to take this case pro bono because what your son did makes me sick, but I need you to trust me and do exactly what I say." "I trust you," I said. And I did. For the first time since Marcus drove away from that airport in Ghana, I felt hope. "Good. First thing, did you save any evidence? Text messages, emails, anything where he promised to take care of you during the trip?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the text messages Marcus had sent me before the trip, talking about our family vacation, about how he wanted to show me the motherland, about how this was his thank you for everything I'd done. Jerome took screenshots of everything. "Perfect. Second thing, I need you to not contact Marcus or Chanel. Don't call, don't text, don't show up at their house. Can you do that?" It was hard, but I nodded. "I can do that. Third thing, and this is important, I need to know everything about your relationship with Marcus. Every penny you spent on him, every sacrifice you made. We're going to build a case that shows a pattern of financial and emotional abuse." For the next 3 weeks, I met with Jerome almost every day. I brought him old receipts, bank statements showing money I'd transferred to Marcus over the years, emails where he'd asked for financial help and I'd given it. I told him about the $10,000 I'd given Marcus and Chanel for their wedding, the $5,000 I'd loaned him when he said his car broke down, the $3,000 I'd sent when he said they needed help with the down payment on their house. "Mrs. Mitchell," Jerome said, looking at the numbers, "you've given your son over $300,000 over the years. Between direct gifts, loans he never paid back, and the cost of his college education." I felt sick. I'd never added it all up before. $300,000. That was a house. That was a retirement. That was a whole different life. "Can I get any of it back?" I asked. "We're going to try," Jerome said. "We're going to try very hard." While Jerome prepared the legal case, Dee Dee and I did some investigating of our own. It turned out Chanel was not the successful real estate agent she pretended to be. She'd been fired from her agency 6 months ago for some shady dealings, and she and Marcus were drowning in debt. Credit cards maxed out, behind on their mortgage, living way beyond their means. "That's why they got rid of you," Dee Dee said. "They knew you'd find out eventually, and they couldn't have you asking questions, or worse, asking for your money back." It all made sense now. The expensive trip to Ghana wasn't a gift. It was a way to get rid of me permanently while making themselves look good to their friends. They probably told everyone how generous they were, taking Marcus's poor old mother to Africa. The more I learned, the angrier I got. But Jerome taught me to channel that anger into something useful. "Anger makes you sloppy," he said, "but calculation makes you dangerous. Stay calm, stay focused, and let me handle the legal side." A month after I got back from Ghana, Jerome filed a lawsuit against Marcus and Chanel. We sued them for elder abuse, fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and reimbursement of the money I'd loaned and given them over the years. We also filed a criminal complaint with the police for elder abandonment. Marcus called me 2 days after he was served with the papers. It was the first time I'd heard from him since Ghana. "Mama, what the hell is this? You're suing me? Your own son?" I stayed calm, just like Jerome taught me. "Yes, Marcus, I am." "This is insane. I took you to Africa like you always wanted, and this is how you repay me?" "You abandoned me there, Marcus. You left me in a foreign country with no way home and almost no money. You lied to me about everything, and you stole from me." "I didn't steal anything. You gave me that money." Did I? Or did you manipulate me, make me feel guilty, make me think I owed you something for being your mother?" There was silence on the other end. Then, "Chanel said you'd do something like this. She said you'd try to ruin our lives. Marcus, baby, you ruined your own life when you decided to treat your mother like garbage. Now you're going to pay for it. I don't have the money to pay you anything. We're broke." "Then I guess I'll be taking your house," I said calmly. "Jerome says we have a strong case for attaching a lien to your property." "You can't do that." "Watch me," I said, and hung up. That felt good. Better than good. It felt like power. 2 more weeks went by. Marcus and Chanel hired a cheap lawyer who kept trying to get the case dismissed, but Jerome shot down every motion. We had too much evidence, too many witnesses from church who could testify about my relationship with Marcus and how much I'd sacrificed for him. Then came the mediation. This was a meeting where both sides tried to settle before going to court. Marcus and Chanel showed up looking scared and angry. Their lawyer looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Jerome laid out our case with surgical precision, every text message, every receipt, every witness statement. By the end of his presentation, Marcus was pale and Chanel was crying. "My clients are willing to offer $20,000 to settle this matter," their lawyer said weakly. Jerome laughed. Actually laughed. "$20,000? Your clients owe Mrs. Mitchell over $300,000, not to mention the emotional damages of being abandoned in a foreign country. We're not settling for anything less than $340,000, plus Mrs. Mitchell's legal fees." "That's impossible. They don't have that kind of money." "Then we'll take it out of their house," Jerome said coldly. "The median has failed. We'll see you in court." We stood up to leave, but Marcus grabbed my arm. "Mama, please, don't do this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I looked at him, at this man I'd raised, this man I'd loved more than my own life, and I felt nothing. The love hadn't died. It had been murdered the day he left me at that airport. "You're not sorry, Marcus. You're just scared. And you should be." As we walked out of the mediation, Jerome put his hand on my shoulder. "That went well. They're terrified, which means they know we have them. The trial is in 3 weeks. Are you ready?" "I'm ready," I said. And I was. But what I didn't know was that Marcus and Chanel had one more trick up their sleeves. One last, desperate move that would make everything even worse for them and so much better for me. The week before the trial, I found out Marcus and Chanel were telling people at their church that I was mentally unstable and making up lies about them. They said I had dementia and didn't remember that I had insisted on staying in Ghana alone. They painted themselves as the victims of a crazy old woman who was trying to steal their house. Dee Dee found out because her cousin attended the same church as Marcus and Chanel, a big megachurch on the north side of Atlanta where everyone dressed nice and nobody really knew each other. Not like my church, where we were family. "Girl, you need to hear this recording," Dee Dee said, coming to my apartment one evening. She pulled out her phone and played an audio clip. It was Chanel's voice, talking to a group of women. "Marcus is devastated. His mother has completely turned on him after everything he's done for her. He took her to Africa, paid for everything, and she's claiming he abandoned her there. The truth is, she wanted to stay longer and we had to come back for work. Now she's suing us for money she gave us as gifts, trying to say we stole from her. It's elder abuse in reverse. We're the victims here." The women in the recording made sympathetic noises, telling Chanel they'd pray for her. I felt sick listening to it, but Jerome just smiled when I played it for him. "Perfect," he said. "This is defamation. They're lying about you to damage your reputation and credibility before the trial. This just gave us more ammunition." But the lies hurt. They hurt because some people believed them, says. I started getting strange looks at the grocery store from people who went to Marcus's church. Someone even stopped me in the parking lot and told me I should be ashamed of myself for what I was doing to my son. Pastor Williams from my church called an emergency meeting with the deacons and deaconesses. About 30 people showed up at the church on a Wednesday night, and Pastor Williams stood up and addressed everyone. Sister Lorraine has been a faithful member of this church for 23 years. I've watched her raise her son alone, sacrifice everything for that boy, and now he's abandoned her and is trying to destroy her reputation. We're not going to let that happen. This church stands with Sister Lorraine. The whole room erupted in applause and amens. Sister Patricia, who sang soprano in the choir, stood up with tears in her eyes. I remember when Lorraine used to bring Marcus to church in clothes she'd sewn herself because she couldn't afford to buy him new ones. I remember her working the fish fry fundraisers after working double shifts just so she could donate money to the youth ministry for Marcus's trips. That woman gave everything for her child, and I'll testify to that in court if I need to. One by one, people stood up and shared their memories. Brother Davis talked about how I used to drive Marcus to basketball practice, even though my car was falling apart. Sister Monroe remembered me taking extra shifts at the hospital so I could pay for Marcus's SAT prep course. Mother Thompson, who was 82 years old, said she'd been in the delivery room when Marcus was born and had watched me love that boy with everything I had. By the end of the meeting, I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude. I had a whole church family standing behind me, and Marcus had nothing but lies and debt. Jerome added 15 church members to our witness list. Marcus's lawyer tried to object, saying it was excessive, but the judge allowed it. Every single one of them was ready to tell the truth about what kind of mother I'd been. 3 days before the trial, something happened that changed everything. I was at home watching TV when my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw a young black woman I didn't recognize, maybe 25 years old, wearing jeans and a Howard University sweatshirt. I opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" "Are you Lorraine Mitchell?" she asked. "Yes." "My name is Tamika Harris. I'm Marcus's ex-girlfriend. We dated for 4 years before he met Chanel. Can I talk to you?" I let her in, my mind racing. Marcus had never mentioned a serious girlfriend before Chanel. He'd told me Chanel was his first real relationship. Tamika sat down on my couch and pulled out her phone. "I saw on Facebook that you're suing Marcus and Chanel. I need to tell you something. When Marcus and I broke up 5 years ago, it was because he stole money from me. A lot of money." My hands started shaking. "How much?" $40,000. I had inherited it from my grandmother, and I trusted Marcus. We were talking about getting married. He said he needed the money to invest in a business opportunity, and he promised he'd pay me back in 6 months. Instead, he broke up with me 2 weeks later and started dating Chanel. I never saw that money again. Did you ever try to get it back? I thought about suing him, but my family talked me out of it. They said it would be too expensive and too painful. But when I saw that you were standing up to him, I knew I had to tell you. Marcus is a con artist. He used you, and he used me. I have bank statements showing the transfer, text messages where he promised to pay me back, everything. I want to testify at your trial. I called Jerome immediately. Within an hour, he was at my apartment interviewing Tamika. His eyes got wider and wider as she showed him the evidence. "This is huge," Jerome said. "This establishes a pattern of financial exploitation. Marcus didn't just hurt his mother. He's been scamming people for years. Tamika, would you be willing to testify?" "Absolutely," she said. "Marcus needs to be stopped." That night, Jerome filed an emergency motion to add Tamika as a witness and her evidence to our case. Marcus's lawyer freaked out, filed 3 different motions trying to block it, but the judge allowed Tamika's testimony because it showed a pattern of behavior. I found out later that Marcus called Tamika 20 times that night, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails begging her not to testify. She recorded all of them and gave them to Jerome. In one message, Marcus actually said, "If you testify, you'll ruin my life." Jerome added witness tampering to our complaint. The trial started on a Monday morning in October. The courthouse was downtown, a big, impressive building with marble floors and high ceilings. I wore my best dress, a royal blue one that Sister Patricia had helped me pick out, and I walked in with my head held high. Marcus and Chanel were already there with their lawyer. They looked terrible. Marcus had lost weight and had dark circles under his eyes. Chanel looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. When Marcus saw me, he looked away quickly. The courtroom filled up. On my side were Dee Dee, Jerome, and about 20 people from my church, all dressed in their Sunday best. On Marcus's side were Chanel's mother and sister, and maybe 5 people from their megachurch. The difference was obvious. Judge Anderson was a black woman in her 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that didn't miss anything. She looked over the courtroom and then at the case file in front of her. "This is Mitchell versus Mitchell," she said. "This is a civil case involving allegations of elder abuse, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Mr. Washington, you may present your opening statement." Jerome stood up and he was magnificent. He told my story from beginning to end, every sacrifice, every lie, every penny. He talked about Marcus abandoning me in Ghana, about the pattern of financial exploitation, about Chanel's lies to cover it up. By the time he sat down, half the courtroom was crying, including one of the jurors. Marcus's lawyer, a middle-aged white man named Thompson, did his best. He argued that I had given Marcus money freely, that the trip to Ghana was a misunderstanding, that I was an overbearing mother who couldn't let go. But his heart wasn't in it. You could tell he knew he was defending the indefensible. The first witness was me. Jerome walked me through my entire history with Marcus, every detail. I told the jury about working 2 jobs, about the ramen noodles and the worn-out shoes, about putting Marcus through college while I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. I told them about the excited phone call about Ghana, about the lies, about being abandoned at the airport. When I got to the part about Marcus driving away and leaving me standing there, I started crying. These weren't rehearsed tears. They were real, raw grief for the relationship I'd lost, for the son who had betrayed me. "Mrs. Mitchell," Jerome said gently, "did you ever think your son would treat you this way?" "Never," I said, looking right at Marcus. He was staring at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. "I thought I raised him better than that. I thought I taught him about love and loyalty and respect. But I guess I was wrong." Marcus's lawyer cross-examined me, trying to make me seem like a manipulative mother who used guilt to control her son. But I stayed calm, just like Jerome had taught me. "Mr. Thompson, did I force my son to accept the money I gave him?" "Well, no, but..." "Did I force him to take the trip to Ghana with me?" "No, but you have to understand. Did I force him to abandon me at the airport in a foreign country?" Mr. Thompson had no answer for that. The next witness was Sister Patricia. She brought the entire church directory from 20 years ago and showed the jury my name on every volunteer list, every fundraiser committee, every youth ministry event. She told them about the times I'd worked double shifts so Marcus could go on church trips with his friends. "That woman loved her son more than life itself," Sister Patricia said, pointing at me. "And that man," she pointed at Marcus, "threw her away like garbage." Brother Davis testified about how I used to drive Marcus to basketball practice in a car that barely ran, how I'd wait in the parking lot for 2 hours because I couldn't afford the gas to drive home and come back. Mother Thompson testified about being at the hospital when Marcus was born, about how I'd refused pain medication because I was afraid it would hurt the baby, about how the first words out of my mouth when I held Marcus were, "I promise I'll always protect you." Marcus was crying by the time Mother Thompson finished. Chanel just looked angry. Then came Tamika. She walked to the stand wearing a professional dress and holding her head high. She told the jury about her relationship with Marcus, about the $40,000, about how he'd promised to pay her back and then disappeared. "Did you love Marcus Mitchell?" Jerome asked. "I did," Tamika said. "I loved him and I trusted him, and he used that trust to steal from me, just like he used his mother's love to steal from her. "Objection!" Mr. Thompson shouted. "Speculation!" "Sustained," Judge Anderson said. "The witness will stick to facts." But the damage was done. The jury had heard enough. During cross-examination, Mr. Thompson tried to suggest that Tamika was a scorned ex-girlfriend making up lies for revenge. "Ms. Harris, isn't it true that you're just angry Marcus broke up with you?" "No," Tamika said calmly. "I'm angry he stole $40,000 from me. If he'd just broken up with me, I would have moved on. But he's a thief, and thieves need to be held accountable." The courtroom was dead silent. Even Judge Anderson looked impressed. On the third day of the trial, it was Marcus's turn to testify. He looked like he was walking to his own execution as he took the stand. His hand shook when he put it on the Bible to swear to tell the truth. Jerome didn't go easy on him. "Mr. Mitchell, do you love your mother?" Marcus looked at me, then away. "Of course I do." "Then why did you abandon her in Ghana?" "I didn't abandon her. There was a work emergency and we had to come home early." "What work emergency?" Marcus hesitated. "Chanel had a client issue. Chanel was fired from her real estate agency 6 months before the trip to Ghana, wasn't she?" Mr. Thompson jumped up. "Objection! Relevance!" "Your Honor, the defendant's financial situation is directly relevant to this case," Jerome said. "I'll allow it. Answer the question, Mr. Mitchell." Marcus squirmed in his seat. "Yes, she was fired. So there was no client issue, was there?" "No," Marcus whispered. "Speak up, please." "No, there was no client issue." "Then why did you leave your mother in Ghana?" Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then, "Because Chanel said it would be easier if she wasn't around anymore." The courtroom exploded. Judge Anderson had to bang her gavel 3 times to restore order. I sat there in shock, hearing my worst fear confirmed. They'd planned to get rid of me. "Mr. Mitchell," Jerome said, his voice cold as ice, "are you telling this court that you abandoned your elderly mother in a foreign country because your wife didn't want her around anymore?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like? Explain to the jury how abandoning your mother, who sacrificed everything for you, was somehow justified." Marcus broke down completely. He started sobbing, his whole body shaking. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Chanel said you were too involved in our lives, that we needed space, and I just went along with it. I was weak. I was stupid. I'm so sorry." But his tears didn't move me. They didn't move the jury either. You could see it on their faces. They'd made up their minds. Chanel testified next, and she was a disaster. She was defensive, angry, and came across as cold and calculated. When Jerome asked her why she'd told people I had dementia, she said, "I was just trying to explain the situation." By lying about Mrs. Mitchell's mental health? It's not lying if I believed it was true. "Did you have any medical evidence that Mrs. Mitchell had dementia?" "No, but did any doctor diagnose her with dementia?" "No." "So you just made it up to make yourself look better and Mrs. Mitchell look bad?" Chanel's face turned red. "I was protecting my family." "By destroying an innocent woman's reputation?" "She's not innocent, she's trying to take our house." "Your house that was purchased in part with money Mrs. Mitchell gave you?" Chanel went silent. The trial lasted 5 days total. On the final day, both lawyers gave their closing arguments. Jerome's was powerful and emotional, painting a picture of a devoted mother betrayed by the son she'd sacrificed everything for. Mr. Thompson's closing was weak, asking the jury to consider that families are complicated and mistakes happen. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they came back, I knew from their faces that we'd won. Judge Anderson asked the jury foreman to read the verdict. He was an older black man, a retired teacher, and he looked at Marcus with pure disappointment as he spoke. "In the case of Mitchell versus Mitchell, We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Lorraine Mitchell, on all counts. We award the plaintiff $340,000 in compensatory damages, plus $50,000 in punitive damages, plus legal fees. Additionally, we recommend the district attorney pursue criminal charges for elder abuse and fraud. The courtroom erupted in cheers. My church family was crying and hugging each other. Dee Dee grabbed me so tight I thought she'd crack my ribs. Jerome was grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Marcus and Chanel looked like they'd been hit by a truck. Chanel started screaming at Marcus, saying this was all his fault. Their lawyer just packed up his briefcase and left. Judge Anderson banged her gavel one more time. Order! Mr. Mitchell, Mrs. Mitchell, you have 30 days to pay the judgment. If you cannot pay in full, the court will attach a lien to your property and force a sale. You're also ordered to have no contact with Mrs. Lorraine Mitchell except through attorneys. This court is adjourned. As we walked out of the courthouse, reporters were waiting. The story had gotten attention because of how extreme it was, a son abandoning his mother in Africa. Jerome handled the press while I stood beside him, finally feeling like I could breathe again. That night, my church threw a celebration dinner. We ate fried chicken and collard greens and sweet potato pie, and everyone made toasts to justice and family and standing up for yourself. It was one of the best nights of my life. But the story wasn't over yet. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Jerome. Lorraine, you need to sit down for this. What is it? Marcus and Chanel declared bankruptcy. They're saying they can't pay the judgment. My heart sank. So I get nothing? Not nothing. The court is forcing the sale of their house. But here's the thing. The house is underwater. They owe more on it than it's worth because of all the equity loans they took out. After the bank gets paid, there might only be about $70,000 left. $70,000 out of $390,000. It wasn't enough. It wasn't justice. But, Jerome continued, I have an idea. What if you bought the house at the foreclosure auction? What? I don't have that kind of money. The minimum bid will probably be around $200,000, which is what they still owe the bank. If you can get a loan, you could buy it. Then you'd own Marcus's house. And Lorraine, there's something else. I did some more digging. That house? The down payment came entirely from money you gave Marcus. You have receipts. Legally, you have a claim to that house beyond just the judgment. We could argue you've been a silent partner in the property this whole time. I thought about it. Marcus and Chanel, homeless and broke, losing everything. The house I'd helped buy, now mine. It felt like poetry. Set it up, I said. Let's buy that house. Jerome worked with a bank that was sympathetic to my case, and they gave me a loan based on the judgment and my claim to the property. The foreclosure auction was set for November 15th, exactly 3 months after Marcus had abandoned me in Ghana. I didn't tell Marcus or Chanel I was bidding on the house. I wanted it to be a surprise. The auction was held on the courthouse steps. There were a few other bidders, but when they heard the story, most of them dropped out. One investor kept bidding against me, driving the price up to $220,000. I bid $225,000, which was every penny of the loan the bank would give me. Going once, going twice, sold to Lorraine Mitchell for $225,000. I owned my son's house. Jerome handled all the paperwork. The eviction notice was delivered to Marcus and Chanel on a Tuesday. They had 30 days to vacate the property. Marcus called me, breaking the no-contact order. Mama, please, you can't do this. Where are we supposed to go? I don't know, Marcus, I said calmly. Figure it out. You're always talking about how strong and independent you are. Well, here's your chance to prove it. I hung up before he could respond. The next month was busy. I packed up my tiny apartment, said goodbye to my neighbors, and prepared for the move. My church family helped me, bringing boxes and packing supplies and lots of prayers. On moving day, December 15th, I arrived at Marcus's house, my house, at exactly 9 in the morning. The moving truck was behind me, along with about 15 people from church ready to help me move in. Marcus and Chanel were loading their stuff into a U-Haul in the driveway. They both looked terrible, thin and exhausted and defeated. When Marcus saw me, he just stood there, frozen. I walked up to the front door with my key, and that's when Chanel lost it. She started screaming at me, calling me every name in the book, saying I was an evil woman who destroyed her family. Sister Patricia stepped between us. "Young lady, you destroyed your own family when you convinced that man to abandon his mother. Now get your things and get out of Sister Lorraine's house." The police showed up because Jerome had arranged for them to be there to keep the peace. They stood by while Marcus and Chanel finished loading their truck. I watched from the porch, sitting in the rocking chair that I'd bought Marcus as a housewarming gift years ago. When they were finally done, Marcus walked over to me. He looked like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. He just stood there, tears running down his face. "Goodbye, Marcus," I said quietly. "I hope you learned something from this." He nodded and walked away. I watched them drive off, and I felt nothing. No sadness, no anger, no regret. Just peace. I turned around and looked at my new house. It was beautiful, with 4 bedrooms and a big kitchen and a backyard with a garden. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of but never thought I could have. "Let's get you moved in, Sister Lorraine," Brother Davis said, carrying a box up the steps. As my church family carried my belongings into my new home, I thought about everything that had happened. I'd been betrayed, abandoned, and humiliated. But I'd fought back. I'd stood up for myself. And I'd won. But as I walked through the empty rooms of the house, planning where everything would go, I noticed something strange. There was a locked door in the basement that Marcus and Chanel hadn't cleared out. In their rush to leave, they must have forgotten about it. I tried the handle. Definitely locked. "Jerome," I called out. He was helping carry furniture. "There's a locked room down here. Do I have the right to open it?" "It's your house now," he said. "Everything in it belongs to you, unless they can prove otherwise." Brother Davis came down with a toolbox and popped the lock in about 2 minutes. When we opened the door, we all just stood there, staring. The room was full of boxes, hundreds of boxes, and on top of the first box was a label that read, "Financial Records." My hands were shaking as I opened the first box. Inside were folders and folders of documents, bank statements, invoices, receipts, and contracts. I pulled out a random folder and started reading. Then I started laughing. I laughed so hard I had to sit down on the floor. "Lorraine, what is it?" Dee Dee asked, rushing down the stairs. I held up the papers. "Marcus and Chanel have been running a scam. A big one. They've been fraudulently collecting insurance claims, setting up fake companies, stealing identities." "This room is full of evidence." Jerome grabbed the papers from my hand and started reading. His eyes got bigger with each page. "Oh my God. This is a federal case. This is wire fraud, tax evasion, identity theft. Lorraine, do you know what this means?" "It means they're going to prison," I said. And that's exactly what happened. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's a story for tomorrow. As I sat in that basement, surrounded by evidence of my son's crimes, I realized something. Getting the house back wasn't the end of Marcus and Chanel's problems. It was just the beginning. And I was going to make sure they faced every single consequence of what they'd done. Not just to me, but to everyone they'd ever hurt. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table in my new house, surrounded by boxes of evidence, with Jerome and Dee Dee on either side of me. We spent hours going through documents, and the more we found, the worse it got. Marcus and Chanel had been running their scam for at least 4 years. They'd created fake construction companies and filed fraudulent insurance claims for work that was never done. They'd stolen the identities of at least 12 elderly people and taken out credit cards in their names. They'd set up shell corporations to hide money and avoid paying taxes. The amount of money they'd stolen was over $800,000. "This is way beyond anything I can handle," Jerome said, rubbing his eyes. It was 3 a.m. "We need to call the FBI." "The FBI?" I said. "Are you serious?" "Lorraine, this is federal wire fraud, identity theft across state lines, tax evasion. This is serious prison time. We're talking maybe 10 to 20 years. I thought about Marcus, my baby boy, spending the next 20 years in federal prison, and I felt nothing but anger. He'd made his choices. He'd hurt people. He'd hurt me. Now he had to face the consequences. "Call them," I said. Jerome called a contact he had at the FBI field office in Atlanta. By noon the next day, 2 federal agents were sitting in my living room, going through the boxes. Agent Mitchell was a black woman in her 40s, sharp and professional. Agent Kowalski was a white man in his 50s who'd been investigating financial crimes for 20 years. "Mrs. Mitchell," Agent Mitchell said, "do you have any idea how valuable this evidence is? We've been investigating a fraud ring in the Atlanta area for 2 years, and we could never get enough evidence to prosecute. This might be the break we've been looking for." "You think Marcus and Chanel are part of a bigger operation?" I asked. "We think they might be. Some of these fake companies have connections to other scams we've been tracking. Would you be willing to cooperate with our investigation?" "Whatever you need," I said. "I want everyone they've hurt to get justice." The FBI seized all the evidence and started their investigation. Within a week, they'd executed search warrants on Marcus and Chanel's storage unit, their cars, and even Chanel's mother's house. They found even more evidence, including laptops with detailed records of every scam they'd pulled. Then the FBI started finding victims, real people whose lives had been destroyed by Marcus and Chanel's greed. There was Mrs. Dorothy Washington, a 78-year-old widow who'd had her identity stolen and her credit ruined. There was Mr. James Peterson, a retired teacher who'd hired Marcus's fake construction company to repair his roof and lost $30,000 when the work was never done. There was Miss Clara Henderson, an 82-year-old woman who'd been scammed out of her life savings through a fake investment scheme Chanel had run. The FBI found 17 victims total. 17 people, mostly elderly, mostly black, whose trust had been betrayed by people who looked like them, who came from the same community, who should have protected them instead of preying on them. Agent Mitchell brought me to meet some of the victims. We sat in a church fellowship hall, strangers brought together by our shared pain. Mrs. Washington held my hand and cried. "I thought I was losing my mind," she said. "I kept getting bills for credit cards I never opened, and nobody believed me. The credit card companies said I was lying. My own daughter thought I was getting dementia. I almost ended up homeless because my credit was so bad I couldn't rent an apartment." "I'm so sorry," I said. "I'm so sorry my son did this to you." "It's not your fault, baby," she said, squeezing my hand. "You're a victim too. But now we're going to get justice together." Jerome helped organize all the victims into a group. We met every week at my church, supporting each other and preparing for the trial. It felt good to be part of something bigger than just my own pain. These people understood what I'd been through because they'd been through it too. Marcus and Chanel were arrested in January. 3 weeks after I'd found the evidence, the FBI showed up at the motel where they'd been staying and took them into custody. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, identity theft, tax evasion, money laundering, and elder abuse. The bail was set at $500,000 each. They couldn't pay it, so they stayed in jail while they awaited trial. I went to the bail hearing. I wanted to look Marcus in the eye and let him know I wasn't afraid anymore. When they brought him into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, he looked 20 years older than the last time I'd seen him. His eyes found mine, and I saw something there I'd never seen before: genuine fear. Chanel was in a separate hearing. I heard later that she'd tried to blame everything on Marcus, saying she was just following his lead. But the evidence showed she'd been just as involved, maybe even more so. The federal prosecutor assigned to the case was a woman named Sarah Chen, a tough Asian American lawyer who'd built her career prosecuting white-collar criminals. She met with all the victims and promised us she'd fight for the maximum sentence. "These people targeted the most vulnerable members of our community," she said at one of our victim meetings. "They used their own culture and community connections to gain trust, and then they exploited that trust for personal gain. The betrayal here is especially egregious, and I'm going to make sure the judge understands that." The trial was set for April, 4 months after Marcus and Chanel's arrest. Those 4 months were busy for me. I settled into my new house, making it my own. I painted the walls colors I liked, hung up pictures of my church family, and planted a garden in the backyard. Dee Dee helped me pick out new furniture, and my church donated dishes, linens, and all the little things that make a house a home. I also started volunteering at a senior center, helping elderly people protect themselves from scams. I told my story over and over, and every time I did, someone would come up to me afterward and say, "Thank you. I almost fell for something like that, but now I know better." Turning my pain into purpose helped me heal. I wasn't just Marcus's victim anymore. I was a survivor, an advocate, a warrior for justice. The trial started on a rainy Monday in April. The federal courthouse was even more impressive than the state courthouse where my civil case had been tried. Everything was bigger, more formal, more serious. The jury was selected, 12 people who would decide Marcus and Chanel's fate. Sarah Chen's opening statement was devastating. She walked the jury through every scam, every victim, every lie. She showed them bank records, emails, text messages where Marcus and Chanel had laughed about the people they were stealing from. In one text message, Chanel had written, "These old people are so stupid. They'll believe anything." The jury looked disgusted. Marcus and Chanel's lawyers tried to mount a defense, but there was too much evidence. The paper trail was overwhelming. The testimony was damning. One by one, victims took the stand and told their stories. Mrs. Washington talked about losing her apartment. Mr. Peterson talked about his damaged roof that leaked and caused mold, making him sick. Miss Henderson talked about losing the money she'd saved to leave to her grandchildren. When it was my turn to testify, I told the jury everything: the years of sacrifice, the trip to Ghana, the abandonment, the lies, the betrayal. I told them about finding the evidence in my basement and realizing my son wasn't just a bad son. He was a criminal who'd hurt countless people. "Mrs. Mitchell," Sarah Chen asked, "do you still love your son?" I looked at Marcus. He was crying, his head down on the table. "I love the little boy I raised," I said. "But I don't know this man. The man sitting over there is a stranger to me, a stranger who needs to be held accountable for what he's done." The defense tried to paint Marcus and Chanel as desperate people who'd made mistakes. They talked about financial pressure, about Marcus's student loan debt, about how they'd gotten in over their heads. But Sarah Chen destroyed that narrative on cross-examination. "Mr. Mitchell, were you desperate when you bought a $60,000 car while your mother was working double shifts?" Marcus had no answer. "Were you desperate when you and your wife took 3 vacations to the Caribbean while Mrs. Washington was losing her home?" Still no answer. Were you desperate, or were you just greedy? The trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was so overwhelming that Marcus's lawyer advised him to take a plea deal, but Marcus refused. He insisted on testifying, trying to explain himself to the jury. It was a disaster. Under Sarah Chen's cross-examination, Marcus fell apart. He admitted to the scams. He admitted to targeting elderly people because they were easier to manipulate. He admitted that he'd never felt guilty until he got caught. "Mr. Mitchell, did you feel any remorse when you abandoned your mother in Ghana?" "No," Marcus said quietly. "Not until I got served with the lawsuit." "So you only felt bad when there were consequences?" "I guess so." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the verdict was guilty on all counts. Marcus and Chanel were both convicted of wire fraud, identity theft, tax evasion, money laundering, and elder abuse. They faced up to 20 years in federal prison. The sentencing hearing was 2 months later. All 17 victims were allowed to give impact statements. We each stood up and told the judge how Marcus and Chanel had hurt us, how they'd changed our lives, how we'd lost not just money but our sense of safety and trust. When it was my turn, I spoke directly to the judge, a black man in his 60s named Judge Reynolds, who'd been on the bench for 30 years. Your Honor, I don't stand here today asking for revenge. I stand here asking for justice. My son and his wife didn't just steal money from me and these other victims. They stole our dignity. They stole our trust. They stole our peace of mind. I will never get back the years I spent sacrificing for a son who saw me as nothing more than a source of income. But I can stand here today and say that I survived. We all survived. And we deserve to see justice done. The courtroom was silent when I sat down. Judge Reynolds looked at Marcus and Chanel for a long moment before speaking. Mr. Mitchell, Mrs. Mitchell, I have presided over many cases in my 30 years on this bench. I have seen greed, desperation, and cruelty. But rarely have I seen such a calculated and cold-hearted betrayal of trust. You didn't just commit crimes. You preyed on the most vulnerable members of your own community, people who trusted you because you looked like them, because you came from the same culture, because you should have been their brothers and sisters instead of their predators. He paused, looking at the stack of victim impact statements on his desk. You, Mr. Mitchell, betrayed the woman who gave you life, who sacrificed everything for you, who loved you unconditionally. You left her in a foreign country like she was garbage, and you did it without remorse, without hesitation, because you saw her not as your mother, but as an obstacle to your greed. Marcus was sobbing now, his whole body shaking. Chanel sat stone-faced, refusing to show emotion. The sentencing guidelines suggest 15 to 20 years. The prosecution has asked for the maximum. I am inclined to agree. Mr. Mitchell, you are hereby sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. Mrs. Mitchell, you are sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You are both ordered to pay full restitution to all victims, totaling $1,200,000 plus interest. The courtroom erupted. The victims were crying and hugging each other. Marcus collapsed in his chair, and Chanel started screaming that it wasn't fair, that the sentence was too harsh. Judge Reynolds banged his gavel. Justice is rarely convenient for those who deserve it. This court is adjourned. As the marshals led Marcus and Chanel out of the courtroom, Marcus turned and looked at me one last time. His mouth moved, forming the words, "I'm sorry." But it was too late. Way too late. Outside the courthouse, reporters were everywhere. Sarah Chen gave a statement about the importance of protecting vulnerable populations from fraud. The victims stood together, a united front, showing the world that we hadn't been broken by what happened to us. A reporter asked me how I felt about my son going to prison for 18 years. I feel sad, I said honestly. Sad that he made such terrible choices. Sad that he hurt so many people. Sad that the little boy I raised grew up to be someone I don't even recognize. But I also feel relief. Relief that he can't hurt anyone else. Relief that justice was served. And relief that I can finally move on with my life. That night, my church threw another celebration, but it was different from the first one. This wasn't just about me winning my case. This was about a whole community coming together to fight back against people who'd tried to destroy us. Mrs. Washington was there, and Mr. Peterson, and Miss Henderson, and all the other victims. We ate and laughed and cried and prayed together. Pastor Williams gave a short sermon about justice and mercy and the importance of standing up for what's right even when it's hard. Sister Lorraine could have stayed quiet, he said. She could have taken her judgment from the civil case and walked away, but instead, she found evidence of crimes and turned it over to authorities, knowing it would hurt her son even more. That took courage. That took strength. And that's what it means to live with integrity. The room erupted in applause, and I stood there crying, surrounded by people who'd become my family in ways Marcus never could. Over the next year, my life transformed in ways I never imagined. The restitution payments started coming in as the government seized Marcus and Chanel's assets. I received about $200,000, which I used to pay off my mortgage and put the rest into savings. For the first time in my life, I was financially secure. I retired from my job at the hospital. After 30 years of nursing, I'd earned the right to rest. But I didn't stop working. I became a full-time advocate for elder abuse prevention. I spoke at churches, senior centers, and community organizations all over Atlanta. I told my story, taught people how to recognize scams, and helped victims navigate the legal system. Dee Dee moved in with me. Her apartment lease was up, and she was tired of living alone. We turned one of the bedrooms into her space, and suddenly my house felt like a real home, full of laughter and music and love. The other victims became my extended family. We met once a month for dinner, rotating houses, sharing recipes and stories and support. Mrs. Washington taught me how to make the best peach cobbler I'd ever tasted. Mr. Peterson helped me fix up my garden, showing me which plants grew best in Georgia soil. Miss Henderson crocheted me a beautiful blanket that I kept on my couch. Marcus wrote me letters from prison, lots of letters. At first, I threw them away without reading them. I wasn't ready, but after about 6 months, Dee Dee convinced me to read one. The letter was 8 pages long, handwritten, and full of apologies and regrets. Marcus talked about the therapy he was getting in prison, about how he was finally understanding what he'd done and why. He talked about growing up feeling like he never had enough, about resenting me for being poor even though I'd given him everything I had. He talked about Chanel encouraging his worst impulses, about how they'd fed each other's greed until it consumed them both. At the end of the letter, he wrote, "Mama, I know I can never make this right. I know I destroyed your life and the lives of so many others. I know I betrayed every value you tried to teach me, but I want you to know that I'm trying to become a better person. I'm taking classes. I'm reading the Bible. I'm learning about financial ethics and empathy and what it means to be a good man. I know I'll probably never see you again, and I understand why. But I hope that someday, somehow, you can find peace. You deserve peace, Mama. You deserve everything good in this world. I'm sorry I couldn't be the son you deserved. Love, Marcus." I cried when I finished reading, not because I felt sorry for him, but because I felt sorry for us both. Sorry for the relationship we could have had if he'd made different choices. Sorry for the years we'd lost. Sorry for the pain that couldn't be undone. But I didn't write back. Maybe someday I would, but not yet. I wasn't ready to forgive him, and I might never be. And that was okay. Healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means learning to live with what happened and finding joy anyway. And I did find joy, so much joy. I traveled, using some of my restitution money to take the trips I'd always dreamed about. I went back to Ghana, but this time on my own terms, with Dee Dee by my side. We visited the slave castles at Cape Coast, and I stood in front of the door of no return, and cried for my ancestors and for myself and for all the pain that had been transformed into strength. I went to Paris and ate croissants by the Eiffel Tower. I went to Jamaica and danced to reggae music on the beach. I went to London and saw the changing of the guard. Every trip was a celebration of freedom, of resilience, of survival. I also found love. Not romantic love, but something better. Self-love. For the first time in my life, I wasn't defined by my relationship to someone else. I wasn't Marcus's mother or anyone's caretaker. I was just Lorraine, a woman who'd survived hell and come out stronger on the other side. I took up painting and discovered I was actually pretty good at it. I painted sunsets and flowers and abstract expressions of emotion. My house became a gallery of my own work, bright colors declaring that I was alive and thriving. I joined a book club at the library and made new friends who knew nothing about my past until I chose to share it. I was just Lorraine to them, the funny lady who always brought the best snacks and had insightful things to say about the novels we read. On the 2-year anniversary of finding the evidence in my basement, I threw a party. All the victims came, along with my church family, Jerome, Sarah Chen, even Agent Mitchell from the FBI. We celebrated not just justice, but survival and community and the power of refusing to stay defeated. Pastor Williams made a toast. To Sister Lorraine, who taught us that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up, dusting yourself off, and building something beautiful from the broken pieces. To Lorraine! To Lorraine! Everyone shouted, raising their glasses. I stood there in my beautiful house, surrounded by people who loved me, and I realized something profound. Marcus's betrayal had been the worst thing that ever happened to me, but it had also been the catalyst for the best thing. It had forced me to stand up for myself, to discover my own strength, to build a life that was truly mine. I didn't need Marcus's love anymore because I had something better. I had my own love, and the love of a community that had rallied around me. 3 years after the trial, I received one more letter from Marcus. It was short, just a few paragraphs. He told me he was up for early parole review because of good behavior and his participation in rehabilitation programs. He wanted to know if I would write a letter in support of his parole. I sat with that letter for a long time. Part of me wanted to write the letter, to show mercy, to give him a second chance. But another part of me, the part that remembered standing at that airport in Ghana, the part that remembered all the victims he'd hurt, knew that mercy had to be earned, not just requested. I wrote back. It was the first letter I'd sent him in 3 years. Marcus, I appreciate that you're trying to better yourself in prison. I hope you continue on that path, but I cannot and will not support your early release. You were sentenced to 18 years for very serious crimes that destroyed lives. You need to serve your time, reflect on what you've done, and truly transform yourself. Maybe after you've served your full sentence, we can talk about rebuilding our relationship. But not before. You have to earn redemption, Marcus. It's not something I can give you. Love, Mama. He didn't get early parole. The review board agreed that he needed to serve more time. I felt no guilt about my decision. I'd spent too many years prioritizing Marcus's needs over my own. Never again. Now, 5 years after that trip to Ghana, I'm 63 years old, and I'm living my best life. I wake up every morning in my beautiful house, make coffee in my sunny kitchen, and thank God for giving me the strength to fight back. I spend my days advocating for others, loving my friends, pursuing my hobbies, and building the life I always deserved. Sometimes people ask me if I regret having Marcus, if I wish I'd never had a son who turned out the way he did. The answer is complicated. I don't regret the years of love and joy he gave me when he was young. I don't regret the lessons I learned about strength and survival. But I do regret the years I spent making excuses for him, the years I prioritized his comfort over my own well-being. If I could go back and do it all over again, I would love myself as fiercely as I loved him. I would set boundaries. I would demand respect. I would teach him that love without respect is not real love at all. But I can't go back. I can only move forward, and forward is exactly where I'm headed. Last month, I started a nonprofit organization called Second Chances Senior Support. We help elderly victims of financial fraud navigate the legal system, connect with resources, and rebuild their lives. Mrs. Washington is the vice president. Mr. Peterson handles our community outreach. Ms. Henderson runs our volunteer program. We're making a real difference, helping dozens of people every month. Jerome serves on our board of directors, volunteering his legal expertise. Sarah Chen comes to speak at our events, teaching seniors about their legal rights. Even Agent Mitchell has helped us develop fraud prevention workshops. What Marcus meant for evil, God used for good. That's what Pastor Williams always says, and I believe it's true. My pain became my purpose. My betrayal became my mission. My brokenness became my strength. I'm not defined by what Marcus did to me. I'm defined by how I responded to it. I'm defined by the lives I've helped change, the community I've built, the love I've cultivated in my own heart. Marcus still writes occasionally. I usually don't respond, but I read his letters. He's changed, or at least he claims to be changing. Maybe when he gets out in 13 years, we'll have a conversation. Maybe we'll rebuild something. Or maybe we won't. Either way, I'll be okay. Because I learned the most important lesson of my life through all of this. I am enough. Not as someone's mother, not as someone's caretaker, but as Lorraine Mitchell, a woman of strength and courage and dignity who refused to stay defeated. My son left me in a foreign country, but when he returned home, he couldn't believe his eyes. I wasn't broken. I wasn't crying. I wasn't begging for his love anymore. I was powerful. I was free. I was finally, beautifully, completely myself. And that, more than any court victory or financial settlement, is the greatest revenge of all. Living well, loving fully, and refusing to let anyone else's betrayal define your worth. I am Lorraine Mitchell. I am a survivor. I am a warrior. I am enough. And my story isn't a tragedy, it's a triumph. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.